Welcome to Northwest Book Talk on 99.9 KFRW. I'm your host, Patty Grasher. Each episode, I connect with book writers and book lovers of the local area. On this show, you will discover new books, rediscover older but great books, and tune in as Northwest authors, book coaches, educators, bookshops, and yes, even librarians share their journey and expertise. If books are your passion, stay tuned and connected with Northwest Book Talk. Hello and welcome to this episode of Northwest Book Talk. I'm your host, Patty Grasher. Joining me today is the mastermind behind spine-tingling tales and eerie fantasies, I always get that word mixed up, eerie fantasies, Rebecca Rook. Known for her captivating novels like False Haven and The Penance of Valentine Cash, Rebecca weaves intricate worlds of mystery and horror that leaves readers spellbound. I can vouch to that. So let's get ready to delve into the shadows of her imagination as we explore the art of crafting chilling narratives. Welcome, Rebecca, to the program.
Hi, Patty. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's get started with what made you want to write this kind of genre?
You know, that's a great question, and I think that among the first novels I read as a kid were Nancy Drew novels, and so you have plenty of mystery, you have plenty of eerie adventures and action, and I think that that really stuck with me throughout my whole life. And as I got older, I started reading fantasy and sci-fi and a lot of just genre fiction across genres, and I fell in love with the kind of storytelling that you can do in those genres. The tropes and the themes and the conventions, I just loved them. So that's probably where I got started.
So when did you start writing?
Oh, so I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a writer. I remember having like thoughts where I would go on an adventure and think that would make a great story someday. And by story, I knew I was going to write it down. So I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a writer. I didn't start writing seriously until I was in my 20s. You know, I would write first 10 pages of a novel here and there in my teens, but it wasn't until I got into my early 20s that I started really writing novel-length narratives and stories and really thinking about what makes a great story, what makes a good novel, you know, in terms of like the rhythm of the prose and the internal and external journeys of the characters, all those little details. I didn't really start making that journey until my early 20s.
So did you have any books you read, podcasts you listened to, something that kind of gave you a little bit of direction, or you just kind of found it on your own?
I wish, but no, I did not find it on my own. Yeah, no, I mean, all of us are composites of the influences and the wonderful people we meet along the way, you know, whatever our journey is. And I was super lucky to have some early mentors among my college professors who really encouraged me to keep going. And then as an adult, an older adult, I was lucky enough to really work with some organizations like Hugo House in Seattle, Washington, and Tin House in Portland, Oregon. They offer workshops, they offer year-long courses. They just have some superb instructors that I got to learn from, and those folks really helped me elevate my craft. I also did a lot of workshopping, so working with other people who are writers, you know, writing a genre fiction, and kind of just trading notes about what works, what doesn't work, and really reminding each other that the most important person is the reader. You know,
Right.
you can be super attached to your characters, but the most important person in all of this is the reader, and making sure that they have a wonderful experience.
So what was your first little success story? Did you like your first publication of something?
I think my first publication was in a college literary journal, and I think it was just some short stories that I had written, and I was very excited that they had, you know, that they said yes to that. So I think that was the earliest publication. I also was lucky enough to be selected as a mentor for the Right Team mentorship program for one of my novels, and that So the process for that involved what they call a pitch war, where you tweet your pitch for your novel into the Twitterverse, or the Xverse, I guess, is now what it's called, and a mentor, so it's during a contest, and then during that contest, a mentor hosts your tweet or your pitch and says, yes, I'd love to work with you. So I was lucky enough to have that opportunity as well. Not quite a publication, but it felt like it. It was definitely a success story for sure. So yeah, I think those are probably the examples I'd offer.
So what was your first book? Was it David or?
So my very first novel is The Penance of Valentine Cash.
Okay.
And it is a young adult, it's a young adult adventure fantasy novel. It's a retelling of the 12 labors of Hercules set in North America with American tall tales and folk legends. And essentially, if you don't know about the premise for the 12 labors of Hercules, Hercules goes on a penance after he commits a crime that offended the god, and part of the penance is doing the 12 labors. And so many of the labors that Valentine Cash model or have parallel to Hercules' labors. And so, of course, inspired by the 12 labors of Hercules, but it is very distinctly North American in the sense that we have Route 66 as her mentor and guide. We have Paul Bunyan there. We have High John the Conqueror. We have Pecos Bill. We have all of these distinctly American tall tales involved in the narrative.
What kind of success did that have?
Oh, well, I think it's, I'm happy. So I released that in January of this year. I got a 5-star review from a couple of the reviewing blogs. Their reviews on Goodreads have been delightful and very flattering. So I think that in terms of my author career, I'm just getting started. And so I think that time will tell. But I will say that success for me is how much other people enjoy it. I found a wonderful YouTube reviewer, Witchy Reads, who delved into the penance and spent 30 minutes just, talking about everything she loved about it, maybe some things she wanted, if, in an ideal world kind of thing. And that's the kind of thing, when I found that, I was just elated because somebody was happy and, somebody enjoyed my novel.
Right.
And for me, that's probably going to be my highest metric of success.
Yeah, I think that's great. So, but it would also be a spur for keeping going.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yes. No, I definitely want more people to read it and enjoy it. And, yeah.
So did you have along the way any kind of a block, something that somebody said that kind of put you in a downer, or something that you had to kind of work through to keep yourself up and keep going with your stories, your writing?
I've worked with a lot of different classes, instructors, and fellow students in workshop setting. And I think the reality is not every book is for everyone. And what I mean by that is that there can be a perfectly wonderful novel, and it might just not be somebody's cup of tea. They might just say, you know what, this is not for me, and that's okay. And so I have gotten that feedback before where it's just like, it's okay, it's just not mine, it's not me, I've also gotten feedback on just constructive feedback on how to fix things, obviously from a craft perspective. I don't know that I've had anyone just come out and say, you're terrible, or if they thought that, they kept it to themselves. But I think that's also part of like being a professional in workshop settings is, making sure that you're providing constructive feedback, even if the novel or the piece in question is not necessarily for you.
Right. So do you have any challenges in keeping with whatever book you're working on, that you stay focused and targeted, that kind of thing?
So just to clarify, do I have any challenges in like keeping track of what I've written?
No, keeping motivated, like, that middle of the book slump kind of thing.
The dreaded middle slump. No, goodness, I don't, the motivation part, I think, for me, has never really been a challenge. I've known that I've always wanted to be a writer, and I knew that I would find a way, one way or another, I would be a writer. I think for me, the biggest challenge is figuring out my own process as a writer. I think that there's not enough discussion about how every writer just needs to kind of figure out what practices work for them. For example, when I first started writing, I would just wing it and just keep typing until I hit 50,000 words. That does not work, or if it does not work for me.
Right.
So I learned, after a couple of years that planning and doing some outlining was a game changer for me. So being able to outline my story in a 3-hour structure, 3-act, and to talk about motivation for each scene and talk about emotional tone and external and internal journey, being able to figure out my own process to incorporate all of those variables into the story, I think it's definitely gotten me to where I am now. And so I think that there's a lot of value in being frank with all fellow writers about, what's your process? Can you write in the morning? Can you write, I'm a morning writer. I edit at night. I write in the morning. I think weekends are not great because I don't want to do anything on weekends. So I think that, and I think this is probably true for any artist, regardless of your format. You have to find your own process, and that's definitely a journey. And sometimes it feels like a journey that takes too long. I will speak for myself. I would have loved to arrive at success 10 years ago, but that's just not how art or life works. So.
Right. But I admire that you kept going, until you get that you're well on your way now, and then you kept going. And I think that's encouraging for any beginning writer, or even those who've been writing for a long time, is that it does take time. It's not an overnight success for most of us. So how many books have you published at this point?
So I've published 3, and my 4th one is coming out in 2 weeks. And so what I've done is I had 4 manuscripts that I had written and rewritten and gotten editors and cover designers for, and they were all pretty much in kind of a ready-to-go situation. And so I just started publishing. And so, yeah.
So then you self-published, or?
I'm an independent publisher and writer.
Yeah. That's the way I've gone too. So do you publish just through Amazon, or where do you publish?
I publish through a variety of platforms because I think that a lot of the independent bookstores, they of course they don't want to support Amazon. They want to support authors as best as possible. So they go through Ingram Spark or alternative print-on-demand publishers. Typically it's Ingram Spark from my experience. I do publish on Amazon simply because it has a huge market share, will find you. And I also publish on Barnes & Noble, variety of platforms.
So how did you, as an independent publisher, get on Barnes & Noble? Noble, that's a good word. Barnes & Noble?
Well, they have their press, so you can upload your manuscript, and much like you would for Amazon or Ingram Press, the process is pretty similar.
You're listening to Northwest Book Talk. I am your host, Patty Grasher, and I'm here today with fantasy and horror author Rebecca Rook. Stay with us as we delve more deeply into the challenges and rewards of fiction writing.
For over 20 years, Vancouver Family Magazine has been covering local news, recreation, travel, education, parenting, personalities, and more. We connect your family to people, places, ideas, organizations, helpful resources, and local stories. Pick up your copy every month at over 300 locations all over Clark County, or read online at vancouverfamilymagazine.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X for even more local news and family fun at Vancouver Family.
KXRW Radio would like to help spread the word about food availability. Head to clarkcountyfoodbank.org and click on Find Food to access a map and printable list of pantry locations throughout the region where you can pick up or donate food. That's clarkcountyfoodbank.org.
Welcome back to Northwest Book Talk. I am your host, Patty Grasher. Rebecca Rook continues to share her love and passion of writing adventure and horror books that take place in the Pacific Northwest. So have you had any luck in getting your books into the bookstores?
I've been focusing on publishing books. That's the next step. So for my author goals for this year, I am publishing all of my books, and then I'm working with, and then the next step, so the second 6 months of the year, I am planning to approach independent bookstores with consignment or getting consignment pictures and or just pitching my book to them. And so to that end, what I've been doing is creating press kits for each book. It talks a little bit about, what the book is, who the intended audience is, the inspiration for it, all those kind of little details that gives a bookseller a more holistic idea of what's involved in the story.
Yeah, then I'm sure that'll be another challenge to work with. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So what is the book that you're coming out in, you said in 2 weeks, what's that about?
So that one is called City of Graves, and that is a young adult thriller. And so the premise for that is it really revolves around the idea or the practice of urban exploration. And urban exploration is practiced in a community, and it involves people exploring abandoned places and forgotten spaces through curiosity, to learn about history, to learn about the world around them. And so my thriller is based on a protagonist who is an urban explorer herself. While they're out and about and they start exploring things, they find a body, and they report the body. Body disappears, and death continues to unfold. And so that's a City of Graves. This one is inspired by Portland, Oregon, and I really love this novel. It was so much fun to write, and I hope that glee and that excitement comes through for the reader. Like, I hope they just enjoy reading it.
So would you think of making that into a series, or are you basically going one-on-one?
Yeah, everything I've written thus far is a standalone. I think of all of the novels I've written, City of Graves is absolutely the best candidate for a series.
So do you have thoughts on like a whole series? I know like J.K. Rowling had this whole every book planned out ahead of time,
Right.
that big, right? But
So I don't have a series planned right now. I think I have two other novels that I want to write first. And I think that I appreciate the flexibility I have in being able to switch modalities and genres and write something else. I can come back to City of Graves with a fresh set of ideas, a little bit more time to let an idea for the series percolate a little bit more and mature.
So what, let me think of questions. I don't know why I didn't have questions ahead of time. Usually I do. So how you self-published, so did you have someone help you with the formatting, or was that something that you did learn to do as well?
So I outsourced beta reading, editing, cover designing. Formatting I learned how to do myself, and I use Atticus as a formatter. And so I think if you have Apple, you have the option for Vellum as well, and I know Vellum is considered kind of the gold standard for the industry. I just have a PC device, and I'm happy with it, so I use Atticus. And yeah, it's definitely a learning curve, but I think that, being persistent is the key.
So how do you develop your characters to be unique and different?
So it starts with what they want from me, and it starts with kind of the original inspiration that I have for them. And so, for example, the inspiration for the penance of Valentine Cash came from a country song, and there was a lyric in the song. The lyric is, "The sharp knife of a short life." And that just became an earworm, and I could not stop thinking about this story. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And then I knew what she wanted, and I knew how she was going to get it. And from there, I think that's how my characters really evolve. They start with a core want, and then they have layers added to them through revisions and thoughtful processes and feedback and things like that. And then I think False Haven was inspired by some of my personal experiences working as a conservation crew member in Southern Oregon. And so, I remember just how hard the work was. I remember how remote we were. And I remember thinking, goodness, if there was a haunted house nearby, that would be horrifying.
Right.
And then again, I knew what, Vivian wanted. And so it was very easy for me to put her character together because I knew the setting, I knew what she wanted, and I knew that her story ended on a hopeful note. And so the same for all of my stories. Finch, I knew the opening scene, and I knew the ending scene, and I knew what she wanted. So I think that, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but...
No, it's very good. Yeah. Did any of your characters develop changes that you hadn't expected for them?
Yeah, I think it took me a long time to figure out what. So my novel that's coming out, City of Graves, the main character is Finch Marlowe, and it took me a long, long time to figure out what Finch wanted. And so, though I remember reading earlier iterations of this novel, maybe a couple of years ago, and thinking, goodness, Finch has changed so much since when I first put her on paper. I think, yeah, absolutely. She's probably the one that changed the most. And I think the others are pretty true to themselves. I mean, from the moment they were incepted, if you will.
So how long did this book take from start to finish?
So, yeah, City of Graves. I mean, I think I finished writing City of Graves. I mean, I started in grad school, left it alone for a while, and then I returned to it, did it alone for a while, and then, of course, rewrote it a couple times to really, like, get those layers of, like, embodied feelings and that interiority that you want in a character. I would say, as the crow flies, if you will, like, a couple of years, but it was spread out over a decade. And so I think that one just took a lot of like percolation, a lot of on a back burner in my mind, just kind of bubbling and taking its time. The other three came together much more quickly, and I think that was because I had a better sense of what the characters wanted, and I also was a better writer at the time when I wrote them. So I think that absolutely helps when you're trying to translate this amorphous story in your head onto paper and then make it engaging and exciting for people to read.
Yeah, so your stories have these huge imaginative. Where do you come up with those ideas? They're so like, oh my gosh, they're like, where did you get that? What planet did that zoom in from? So how do you account for that you could be so imaginative, I guess?
I think I surprised myself a couple of times, especially with the pen and some of the more otherworldly elements that came out. I was just like, oh, hello there. But the ideas are everywhere. The media that we consume, even going for a walk, taking a vacation, the ideas are everywhere. And so I think that I've tried to at least. I've gotten very practiced at kind of this internal listening, probably intuition, there's another word for it. Just listening to my intuition when an idea or something that pops into my head comes up and I think, oh, that belongs somewhere. I better keep that. I better write that down. I better email myself that, just in case. And typically, even if it doesn't end up in a story immediately, it ends up in a story even 5 years later. So, yeah, and the ideas are everywhere. I don't think that's probably a satisfactory answer.
I think it's a great answer because I think it is very good, because it's like, yeah, it doesn't just come out, you put it into AI and say, write me a story. What do you think about that? What do you think about AI and writing?
I think AI objectively can be useful in setting like business communications or perhaps technical communication, perhaps creating something like a frequently answered question section on a website. That being said, the AI examples I've seen do require human remediation. So I'm sure their technology will improve dramatically, and what we'll see even a month from now will be even better than ever. But I'm going to continue doing what I do, which is loving stories and sharing them with people.
So I end up with what if someone entered your life and said, I'm thinking about writing, but I don't know whether I should or how to get started. What would some of the advice that you would give?
Just do it. I mean, and that sounds, the first thing is, if somebody said, I want to write a novel and I don't know where to get started, the first thing I'd say to them is, hooray, welcome. Writers are the coolest people I know. You're in great company. And I would talk a little bit about what they want for the story and then kind of tailor any recommendations that that I might have for them. So I actually had a conversation like this with a friend recently, and he's interested in writing a story. He's not written a novel before, and I kind of walked him through, like, okay, so what is the novel, and what do your characters want, and, where are they going to end up, And if you know what your characters want and where they start and where they're going to end up, the rest is a matter of sequencing, essentially. You can figure out, what depth goes where, and you can add layers and all kinds of richness into the story. So I think that would probably be my advice. And figure out, figure out your process,
Right. And you said for you, joining groups and things like that was helpful as well.
Yeah, I think that having, so I have a good friend who is also a writing partner, in the sense that we review each other's, work, and we're a fresh pair of eyes, and so she writes in a different genre, she's wonderful, so I have her, but, I think having a writing group is also really helpful to have people consistently, different perspectives, consistently offer feedback as you're drafting a work.
So I tried to think is there anything that you would like to talk about your book I haven't covered that you find listeners might be interested in?
The thing that I would love to share with the readers is that I love how versatile the young adult format is, or the age group, because you can write so many different stories for that audience, and it's not necessarily young adult doesn't mean only young adult. It means, anybody who wants to read it. But there are certain themes that are prevalent in young adult stories, such as, finding your way, learning who you are, who you want to be moving forward, and how to trust yourself and trust your intuition and your ability to take care of yourself and those around you. So I think that I love young adult fiction because it has so many of those themes that are so important for us, regardless of our age. No matter how young I was or how old I will get, knowing that I can trust myself and that I can take care of myself and the people around me, like that kind of, and seeing that in written stories, that's so valuable, and it's so validating. And so I think that I really love seeing that in young adult fiction.
So thanks, Rebecca, for being with us. I think this is fun. So, great. And so unless things didn't work, like me putting things on mute, it should...
But we got there. We're here.
It's like I told you, it's a brand new mic. I've had it like 3 days, and it's like I'm still like, oh, that's how it works. So it's crazy. I'm used to
every piece of equipment we have, like technology. People joke like technology will make our lives better, and it will. But it also introduces a new set of complications, and so like learning how it interacts with your other devices, how to maximize volume and cancel echoes, and
yeah, it always is something. You think you get so excited. I was so excited. This is going to work so great, and then I can't. I turned the mute off. So anyway. All right. Well, thanks.
It worked great.
It worked, yeah. Okay, thanks, Rebecca. We'll talk again later.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
okay.
I had so much fun.
Oh, good. You've been listening to Northwest Book Talk with Patty Grasher on 99.9 KXRW, serving the greater Vancouver area. Next week, my guest will be with Christy Peterson of Vintage Books. We will explore how authors can get into independent bookstores and much more. To see and hear more about today's guest, Rebecca Rook, and her books, and what's going on at KXRW and X-Ray, join the conversation at kxrwvancouver.fm. If you would like to donate, please visit us on the web at www.kxrwvancouver.fm and click on the donate button. And I want to thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you again right here on Northwest Book Talk.